There we go. Let's adjust that so you can see the better side of me. Hello and welcome to all of you. I'm Jo Henderson and I work in the marketing team here at Dux-Soup. You'll see me here every 2 weeks, so hopefully for some of you I'm a bit familiar. Today I have with me not one Dux-Soup expert, but two. Giles Garnett is our head of professional services and is a regular to the stage, but today I'd also like to welcome our new head of sales, Scott Bright. Hello.
Hi guys.
Hi. Scott is a seasoned webinar host, having first shared his Dux-Soup success story with us back in, was it 2022? Maybe even
21,
earlier?
actually, I think, if I'm not mistaken,
Yeah,
2021.
Yeah.
Has gone on to present 2 further webinars since. So he's now a fully fledged member of the Dux-Soup team as well. Before I hand the stage over to these 2 lovely gentlemen, I'd like to say a massive thank you to all of you who submitted questions in advance. We've had so many that we've decided to run these live Q&A sessions on a more regular basis. And it's a great way for us to understand more about how you like to use our product and how we can help you to do that. For today, we've grouped the content according to some of the topics that we had sent to us, and we hope to be able to touch on most of them as we go through the session. You're all on mute, but as ever, please add any questions that you have into the question box on the dashboard, and we'll go through them as we go through the session. So let's get stuck straight in. I'll disappear off the video, and I'll ask Scott or Giles, take your pick, to get started.
Do you want to go to the next slide? Yeah, there we go. So thanks, Jo, for the introduction there. For anybody who's new to these webinars or anybody who's not been on them, my name is Giles. I'm head of professional services here at Dux-Soup. Oh, bye, Jo. You just disappeared. So yeah, today we're doing the Q&A. Get your questions in. We had loads of really good questions coming in. We're going to cover as many of them as possible. It's not going to be quite quick fire, but we'll hopefully give everybody enough time and attention to be able to get some good, valuable answers to you. I think we've got 4 main topics that we're going to be focusing on today, and as I say, we're going to be probably reviewing this and going over this again in the near future as well, because we saw such a great response for the requirements for questions. Can you flip to the next screen? Or
yeah, I'll definitely jump to the next screen. But one thing I just want to let everybody know is during this presentation as well, please go ahead and put questions into the chat. Joe is going to be monitoring them and interrupting us. I shouldn't say interrupting us, but enlightening us with questions that our audience is really interested in taking a look at. But that said,
yeah, and just for clarification as well, there actually the questions go in the questions box. The chat box as well. We'll be adding links to give you lots of information. It's all the terminology of this platform, you know. It's just how it is. So get the questions in the question box, and you'll hopefully see the links in the chat box from us. So we started off when we were reviewing what had come in already, Dux-Soup and basic usage. Sort of going back to basics really with Dux-Soup and sort of understanding what it is, how you can use it, how do you set it up, etc. We cover this quite regularly, and we've recently did a getting started series of webinars. We did getting started with Dux-Soup Pro, Dux-Soup Turbo, and the Cloud Edition. We have got all of the supporting blogs which are associated with those webinars. Hopefully Joe can now put into the chat box for us. So there's those getting started blogs which we've got. Dux-Soup is essentially an automation robot which mimics human behavior on the LinkedIn platform, and you can use it to automate your actions going through depending on your outreach requirements. And there's a multitude of different ways that you can use it, and we'll touch on many of them today. So yeah, do pay attention because we're going to go into sort of dipping in and out of different variants of Dux-Soup as we go. Essentially though, if you've not used Dux-Soup before, go to the Chrome web store, type in Dux-Soup, DUX-SOUP, install the software, and you get 2 weeks free of the Turbo version, and that's the full feature set. There's no limitations there other than the fact it's only 2 weeks, but you don't have to put any other credentials in there. It's just linked to your Google account. Go in there, install it, and start playing around and automating, and hopefully taking some of the things that we've covered today into your lead generation process going forward.
99, and also to jump in there, Giles, about I would say 90 or 90%, 99% of the people that end up using Dux-Soup do have Chrome, but it is worth mentioning if you can't use Chrome for whatever reason and you use Firefox or Edge or something else, just get in contact with us. We have another version. Requires an extra hoop or two to jump through, but we can get it running there if we need to as well.
Yeah, it's basically compatible with any Chromium-based browser, and there are loads of them. But if you pop to our support pages and you look at, if you just do a quick search for browser on our support pages, you'll see the different variants there as well. So you'll see that you can install what we call a free-range version as well. So there's lots of possibilities there, because some people are, should we say, maybe allergic to Chrome, or they like to use alternative platforms. Dux-Soup will run on other browsers, but it just has to be Chromium based. So just be aware of that as well. Next question, how can I use Dux-Soup efficiently? Actually, this was fast and efficiently was the original question, but that opens up a whole can of worms. Because when you're talking about doing automation, whenever you're sort of conceptually thinking about automating any process, what you want to do is do it as efficiently as possible. And fast isn't necessarily efficient. You go too fast, you may get into trouble, especially on a social media platform such as LinkedIn. Good to see Scott nodding along there in agreement. There are all sorts of guidelines around this, and there's lots of rumor and conjecture in the IT world as well about what is safe and what is not safe on the LinkedIn platform. What we have to remember, LinkedIn is a commercial platform that is owned by Microsoft now, and what they predominantly want to do is make money out of their platform. So what we're seeing happen a lot is that they are pushing people to paid accounts. So you need some, if you're wanting to leverage the LinkedIn platform for your commercial use, you will need some sort of a paid LinkedIn account to get the most out of it. That's irrespective of whether you're using Dux-Soup Pro, Dux-Soup Turbo, or the cloud version. Think about that whole package of tools when you're coming to do this. And then when you say there, how can I use Dux-Soup efficiently? We'll be touching on a lot of this when we come to our campaigns in a minute, but there are all sorts of different approaches, from the light touch of just auto-visiting profiles and gathering data. There's the approach of sending connection requests, and then there's the much more extended possibility of building campaigns, gathering data, having all of that data put into your CRM or other platform. So fast and efficient, we want to focus on the efficiency and the effectiveness. So coupling together all of the things that we'll talk about on regarding search results and campaign building and approaches, that's how you can really make Dux-Soup as efficient as possible for you. So think about it in that sort of terms.
And correct me if I'm wrong here, Giles. I was just sorry. Correct me if I'm wrong, but when it comes to like, well, I mean, because one of the #1 questions I get asked on a daily basis is how many, how many like connection requests or how many messages can I send out a day or whatnot. And I think we're going to touch on this on our last slide, I think briefly, but it is important to note, like, it's not a science. And I think of it as like a speed limit, right? When you're driving by and is the cop around the corner? Well, maybe. And so we have some best practices, I believe, but maybe you could touch on that briefly, or we could wait till we get to the slide, I suppose.
No, I'll touch on that now as well, because basically every LinkedIn account is different. It depends how long you've had an account. It depends on how many first-degree connections you've got. It depends on the makeup of your network. It depends whether you've got a free LinkedIn account or a paid LinkedIn account, and whether that's a basic account or a sales nav or a recruiter account. And then it depends upon your behavior on the platform. Are you being, as we often say, are you being a good LinkedIn citizen? Are you behaving in the way that LinkedIn would like their ideal clients to behave? Are you not spamming people? Are you getting good response rates? So when I talk about a good response rate, that for you, that could be 20%. So you send out 100 connection requests and you get 20% acceptances. That could be a really good response rate for some people. Some people, they're looking at more like 40, 50, 60% response rates, depending on their market, depending on their industry, depending on all sorts of other factors. The one thing we cannot control is when someone's going to accept our connection request. What we can do is we can control how many connection requests we send. We can control our behavior on LinkedIn, and Dux-Soup can help you with all of that. So we've got a couple of really good blog posts around this. One's about the weekly limits, because everyone says, oh, I can only send 100 invites a week. Well, that's just conjecture, actually. And it depends upon a lot of the factors that you'll read in that blog. And there's another one about keeping your LinkedIn account safe, which goes into all sorts of things, from acceptance rates to avoiding spamming people to monitoring your social selling index on LinkedIn. So think of this complete package influencing the LinkedIn algorithm. So if somebody asks me what's safe, I say, well, I have to ask lots of questions to get a better understanding. So it's a case of sort of understanding what's going on in the background before we can give you guidance in that area. But once you understand it, it becomes really clear. And the great news is if you've got a paid account and you're having success, you can do more over time.
Yeah.
We've proven that. We've seen it time and time again. You can slowly accelerate. So patience is the key there as well. Anything to add to that, Scott?
Nothing other than like people say, oh, I can do this many a day or a week based on this percentage of how many first degree connections I have. I've seen people say like every third Saturday when Mercury's in retrograde on a 6th day in June or something. Like there's many rumors and things out there, which ones are true and which ones are not. It's hard to say exactly which ones, but in general, with the number of interactions Giles and I do on a daily basis, which is about probably 10 to 12 support calls a day, and we get asked the same question, what we generally say is exactly what you mentioned. You know, are you getting people to accept your connection, right? Are you getting reported as spam when you send out your connection request, right? What is your SSI? You know, being a good LinkedIn citizen. There you go. I think that fits it just right. But when you're paying for LinkedIn, maybe it's kind of considered the mafia, just kidding, but don't ban my account. But when you're paying for LinkedIn, then we've seen obviously that they are able to open up a little bit more for you to utilize more areas of their platform. So yeah.
Excellent, cool. Thank you for that, Scott. On to the last one on this slide anyway, before we hand over to Scott's first stint. Where do I go to get help, assistance and training? So we have a fabulous support team who are essentially the backbone of Dux-Soup insofar as they are the first port of call if you've got a problem. Joe will hopefully add the support link into the chat box and you'll see the email address as well. It's info@dux-soup.com. To get hold of our support team. There's a live chat option as well on our support pages, so you can always reach somebody during the week, Monday through Friday. If you need assistance, then we also do set up support calls. That will be with myself, with Scott, or sometimes even with Will, who's the founder of Dux-Soup. So depending on the issue that you're facing. And then if you need training, depending on the type of license you've got, there are some packages which include some consultation and training hours, et cetera, if you're looking at multi-seat licenses. But you can also pay for individual hours of training or consultancy to help you solve your problem, build your process, maybe even help you with defining an integration with Zapier, perhaps, those sorts of things, depending on your requirements. There was one question which we had, which was like, how can, you know, I'm short of time, how can I get up to speed really quickly? I had a client last year, for example, who decided, right, I want 5 hours of training split over 5 weeks. We put together a syllabus for them. We did a 5-week, 1 hour per week. The fifth week was basically reviewing everything. We put everything together for them. We record the sessions as well. And they were able to then roll that out to their entire team over a period of time. And they still use that resource to this day for any new starters. So even though Dux-Soup is evolving continually, we are also making sure that the information that we share is relevant and appropriate going forward. So have a look at the website. You'll find all of the links on the website as to how to get the services. There you are. Joe's put that link into the chat, and the support pages, as I refer to it, the support portal, where there's answers to nearly all the questions you can think of. And if there aren't, then there's people there to answer them as well. And that's it from me for this slide. I think I'll now hand back over to Scott, and you can dig in further with these ones.
Well, Giles, you're not going far, so because you're going to be adding to this as well. So it's funny, we a lot of the questions that we got leading up to this, a lot of them were overlapping in some ways and weren't in others. But I mean, we got at least like I think 20 questions that sort of were around campaign management and strategy. So it's kind of hard for us to boil this down into 3. But I felt like these 3 were good ones to start with that we could branch off and talk about in these areas. So one of the I think even in the taglines of promoting for this webinar was I think it was a webinar that I actually did in 2021, which was how to go from 0 to 350 meetings. And so I want to just start that because it plays really well with the first one, which is how can I manage multiple LinkedIn accounts for my clients with Turbo or Cloud Agency, right? Well, what you can do first off, touching on the webinar for about when I was able to do 0 to 350 meetings in that amount of time, it was not just on my own profile. That's the first thing I want to just let everybody know. It's using multiple different profiles, right? Using my CEO, I was working at a startup at the time, so I was using my CEO's profile. I was using the product manager's profile. I was using a sales engineer's profile. I was using my profile. I was using, the other sales reps profile. And all in all, I believe we had around 12 different profiles running, something like that. Each one of them were sort of geared towards different strategies. So for instance, the product marketing person, this is something, a little trick that I like to do, is what we would do with that person is we would actually connect with people and say, hey, I'm looking to get product market feedback on this certain thing, which was like our startup product we were getting ready to release. And we're looking like we're still in stealth mode, or, we're not ready to quite go into general release. And we're looking for somebody like yourself to give us background. And so naturally, the prospect's going to say, yeah, I would love to. That sounds interesting, because also I'm not a salesperson. I'm acting as, my product marketing person or product engineering person. So they sign up. They say, sure, they'll get on a call. And then what ends up happening is a salesperson is also joined in that call. And then you just end up going through a demo of the product anyways. And the person is going to be able to tell you, hey, I think that this is a really cool product. You should talk to the rest of my team about this. I think that would be really cool. Or they're going to say, hey, I don't think that that's actually a good fit for what it is we're looking for. But we're leveraging different sort of approaches there, right? And how you can sort of use this, there's many different ways to use multiple different profiles with Dux-Soup. And Giles, keep me true on this. The first way you can manage multiple different profiles is quite literally by creating a separate Google Chrome browser, right? Since Dux-Soup needs a Chrome browser and a Gmail to run, you can set up a secondary one up in the top right-hand corner of your Google Chrome. You've got your little personal icon up there. You can click there and switch to a second sort of profile. Maybe a lot of people have like their work profile and their personal profile, right? Well, you could quite literally just get Dux-Soup installed on that one and have both of them running there. That is a very rudimentary way of running it. It still is a little wonky too, because you have to keep your computer running and keep it up to speed. So, and you have to keep your computer on all the times, so Dux-Soup can be able to run properly, at least on our Pro and our Turbo models.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Right there, a couple of things there, Scott.
Please.
Say about having different windows open. Some people get confused. They think, oh, if I just open a new window, then that's enough. No, you need a separate Chrome profile, and you don't have to have that Chrome profile registered against a Gmail account. You can actually create a Chrome profile with any email address as long as you've got access to it. So I'm just digging out right now the blog post around running multiple accounts, because this is how we've been doing it for a long time until very recently, and we're going to come on, I think, to some of the funky stuff that we've released recently around managing multiple accounts with an agency license. Always in the past, it's been one LinkedIn account per Dux-Soup account per Chrome account. That's kind of the ecosystem that you've had to think of. And for many people, that is the perfect way to do it. I was speaking to somebody earlier today who had, I think they had 12 accounts running, and they sort of dovetail them through the day, so they're active at different times on their device. So they're not all 12 active at once. But that is an absolutely perfectly feasible way of running Dux-Soup. Because you're using Chrome, and Chrome is notoriously not the most efficient piece of software in the world, it can slow your device down. But we also see, for example, people running their Dux-Soup activities on an alternative device. So perhaps they've got an old device, a spare laptop or an old desktop computer or whatever. As long as they can keep Chrome up to date on there, they can be running their Dux-Soup activity in multiple Chrome windows in that environment.
Yeah, and before we jump over to that portion, because that's a great segue to also virtual environments, I just wanted to show people on the call who can see my screen right now. What we're talking about specifically is basically being able to create a separate profile, just like this, which has a separate email that's associated with each one of these. And this is the one here in orange. I like to do different colors so that I know that it's a different person, right? The one I have here in orange is associated with a LinkedIn profile a separate LinkedIn profile with a separate Dux-Soup, account tied to this, in comparison to this, which is a different LinkedIn account with a different Dux-Soup account associated with this. And I'm having both of these run at the same time. Now, Giles, so I had an agency called Amped Marketing. It's still running as well, where we have 100 different profiles running currently that are all real people on these computers. How are we doing that? We are doing that through what you were mentioning by using an alternative machine, right? Which you could have a separate laptop. We even have an article somewhere on our page about how to run it off a Raspberry Pi, which is kind of cool. I've done that before too. But a lot of people will just get another laptop and put it up in there and then change the display settings to never go to sleep. And then that way Dux-Soup's running. Another alternative is using a virtual machine. And this is exactly what we do at Amped, is we have basically a remote desktop. And then what you're able to do in there is set up the profiles and you rent out a remote desktop. There's different services. We've used a service called like V2 Cloud, but AWS offers one, Azure offers one. And I think they'll run you the gamut of, what would you say, Giles, $30, $40 a month USD, something like that for a remote desktop?
Depends upon how big, how much scalability you have, but there are, I think the article that I've just shared about running multiple accounts has got some guidance as to, roughly how many accounts you can run on a server, depending on the number of cores you've got running and the amount of RAM, etc., etc. So there's a whole host of different options there. I mean, I see some people running on VPS services that run, cost $10, $15, maybe $20 a month. So there are lower cost options. It depends upon your requirements and how many accounts you're looking to run.
And in one, I've seen the limit, or not seen the limit, but we've at one time I've done over 15, in fact, in the realm of 20 or so on one. And it gets a little, let's say the computer could also take flight potentially, because that's a lot of Chrome browsers running also at times.
But you can also make use then of the planner to, as I said earlier, dovetail the activities. So you've maybe only got 2 or 3 running simultaneously.
That's correct.
Cool.
So that is with using.
Just touch on the agency version there as well then.
Yep, absolutely. And so that is how you would use, like with Pro and with Turbo. With our newly released cloud agency, what you're able to do is, well, you don't have to worry about any of those. And what you actually will be able to do is inside of the Dux Dash, you can actually switch between actual Chrome profiles. And so you could be in there and switch between each person. And because they are going to be on using Dux-Soup Cloud does not require the message bridge sort of to be running or have an active Chrome window, because we are able to clone your browser and using your basically LinkedIn session ID, have Dux-Soup running on our servers 24/7, right? So you never have to worry about those pesky tabs popping up or anything like that. And on the Cloud Agency dashboard version, you're going to be able to easily slip between different types of profiles. Hopefully I explained that correctly. Would you add anything or?
Yeah, I think the thing to remember here is you're not actually swapping between Chrome profiles. What you're doing is you're just swapping between LinkedIn profiles. Your Dux-Soup session, you can then switch between each one. The whole thing is basically the complexity is in the setup phase. You create a new profile, you log on to that LinkedIn account, Dux-Soup then clones it, and then you log on to the next one and create that session and so on and so forth. You're basically initiating those cloud sessions, and once they're up and running, you don't have to touch them. The only thing you then need to do is enroll people from your local device.
And what's also,
I think there's going to be some blog posts released around this in the coming days, maybe even later today, if I remember rightly. Is that right, Joe?
I'll double check on that one, but yes, quite possibly.
Perfect.
I've got some good questions coming in, Scott. Would you like some now, or would you like to get
You know it. This thing's meant for questions, so let's do it.
Yeah.
So some of these I think we've touched on, but I've been multitasking, so forgive me. Hopefully it'll just be a quick question. This is from Mike. If I have 2 campaigns and both are on, do they run at the same time, or only does one of them take priority? Can you put one as a preferred campaign?
Giles, I'll let you take that one.
So Dux-Soup, depending on what you've got in your queue, Dux-Soup will cycle through your different campaigns. So it'll look to see what's scheduled. and it will just cycle through the activities and the campaigns that you've got active. So it won't wait until it's finished all of the actions on one before it then actions the other. It will actually just cycle through. Now, you can always prioritize things by turning a campaign off, and then of course the other campaign will take precedence, but you can't sort of prioritize without turning a campaign off. But it will cycle through actions and campaigns to allow you to have that outreach overlapping each other and running in parallel.
And with the preferred little dot when you're choosing, how does that affect it?
Yeah, so actually the preferred button there, it's possibly a little confusing. What it actually refers to, the only thing it refers to essentially, is the default campaign that is selected when you go to your drop-down box. If you're in a search result, or if you're in if you're running from a search result and you're using the widget at the sidebar, it basically defines which is the default one that's selected there.
Yep.
Okay. How long is the lag from when a connection replies and it's registered in Dux-Soup?
Oh, this was a question from Eric, I think. So, so Dux-Soup has a functionality called the message bridge, which is checking periodically for new connections and responses in both your regular mailbox and your Sales Navigator mailbox. Dux-Soup, essentially, the default setting is that every 20 minutes it's going to do one of those checks. So in reality, that is 1 hour, because there's 3 different checks. It's 1 hour between each check. So every hour, the default is that it will check for new messages. So that's the lag that you see. Now, you can change that setting, and a lot of people, and Scott's hopefully going to show this live. There we go. So we go to the Connect tab. There we go. And there you are. You see here, you've got set yours to 20 minutes there. So you can see here that Dux-Soup will check your regular mailbox, it'll check your Sales Navigator mailbox, and then it'll check for new connections. That's the lag that you will see. Yeah, you can shorten that, but if you do, then just be aware that you will see, if you're running Turbo on your local device, you will see more frequently a new tab opening as Dux-Soup performs those checks. But of course, if you do that with Cloud, of course, they'll happen without you seeing them.
Okay. And so some integrations, actually, I believe the Woodpecker integration, if you do set up that version and you interlay, so with Woodpecker, for those who don't know, it's an email automation tool. We're going to be actually doing a webinar in a couple weeks on this, but you can inlay actually Dux-Soup steps in it with email. But when it does that, when you set it up, it goes ahead and changes the message bridge actually to 5 minutes. So just FYI, it does that automatically, and you'd have to change it back. But yeah, great question.
Carry on.
Awesome. So
talk about some strategies for targeting things here. So let's talk about some examples. I think we've talked about some stuff quite a lot. So I think we need to give this some time.
So I love talking about niche markets. Already, just last week, I was able to speak to somebody who sells like mining safety software for like mining into mines and whatnot. And it was really, really fascinating. And it's really great to see some of the people that are utilizing Dux-Soup. But how do you maybe target these? Like, how do you even go about this? And so I want to share a quick story that I've done before that works really well. I've got a few of these, so I can share a few more. But one I like that is kind of near and dear to my heart is there was a nonprofit that basically helped those with the side effects of cancer. So what I learned is that once you go under the knife and you have cancer taken care of, or they see that it's sort of gone, they sort of just kind of see you on out, and the doctor goes on to the next patient, and you're not really set up for, you know, support for what you're supposed to expect when it comes to side effects, at least long term. This is what I've heard, right? Or at least what this company was telling me. So they opened up this clinic and they wanted to get more patients in. And so they came and found out about us, and we started having a conversation with them. And what they ended up saying was like, Scott, I don't think that this is going to work. They were actually referred from like a friend of a friend, and they were just having like a general talk. They didn't think it was going to work because they're like, look, doctors are sure they're on LinkedIn, but they're not going to pay attention to us. Like, they don't pay attention to LinkedIn, right? They're too busy doing the surgeries and whatnot, yada, yada, yada. And then so we did a quick search, and sure enough, we found some doctors to see if we could get some patients referred, and we were talking it through. And as we started talking through a little bit, we said like, well, maybe you're right. Like, the doctors, like, like they need to be the rock stars. Like I kind of want them to be the rock stars, right? They need to be focused on patient to patient and patient and doing like the best possible work. So when it comes to what you guys are offering, like I think you need to talk to maybe somebody else, maybe like the nurses, the oncology nurses. Those are the ones that are actually having interactions with the patients, who actually are able to meet with them on a daily basis while they're, getting ready for surgery and slightly after surgery. And they're the ones that maybe you want to feel maybe more attached to them. So what we did is we targeted the oncology nurses, and we targeted them using a doctor's profile who worked there. So it was like these two people, this guy who had cancer, this is the guy who started it, and then his co-founder who was a previous surgeon and whatnot. So we used his profile and messaging and started targeting these nurse oncologists. And something interesting happened, and this happens a lot in niche markets. They started responding very, very well. And we were able to even get 5 referral patients in the first about month or so, which was amazing. And it was great to see. And my theory that I've seen over time because of this is that nurse or oncology nurses in this case are not approached on LinkedIn as much as Giles or myself are as the head of sales for a tech company, or if you work in recruiting, or if you work in marketing at a big company or something like that. You have people all day long in your inbox on LinkedIn. But when it comes to some of the more of these niche markets and industries and folks, they have LinkedIn literally as just a reflection of their resume to some degree. And there's likely not very many people that are approaching them in these niche markets. So if they have LinkedIn downloaded on their phone, they're probably turned off the notifications, but they probably haven't turned off some of them because of them getting inundated with the number of messages. And so if you think about it, when it comes to a niche market, I get very, very excited about these because you have almost like a ripe opportunity to now approach a new landscape that hasn't been approached on LinkedIn before. I've done a very similar thing also with police organizations. I worked with a company where they sold body camera editing software to sheriff's offices. And as we started sitting there and thinking about it, they're like, yeah, we target sheriffs and of all the head sheriff or whatnot because they're the decision maker. Well, hold on, are they? I know they're the head decision maker, but who's actually utilizing the software? And we found out that it was more times than not this person called a record keeper at these places. And we looked up some of the record keeper profiles and noticed that almost all of them didn't go to college, which is okay, doesn't matter, but most of them had been there for about 15 to 20 years at these organizations. And so we took that into consideration. And when we started taking our approach, we started approaching them instead and coming in with an idea of like, hey, I see that you've been working at this place for so long. That's so great that you've been able to work there and so on and so forth, and start talking about, body camera editing software. And that ended up landing much better than trying to target, the police chief, who's like the head decision maker there. And so what I like to share on these niche markets, if you will, is try to get creative and try to think like if I could, for instance, go back and do that sheriff one, if I had a sheriff's profile that I could use, right? One of the multiple profiles, if I'd had a sheriff's profile I could use to approach these people, I think that would go really well. And I think when it comes to niche markets, using like if you're an engineer trying to approach other engineers, use the engineer profile. If you're a doctor approaching doctors, use a doctor, right? If you're, so on and so forth, try to find yourself sort of an angle and get creative with your niche sort of market. And remember that you are going to probably be one of the first sort of people that are interacting with these folks. And so it's going to be good if you can use somebody else's profile, like maybe your CEO's or maybe, somebody else that's an executive at your company, a CMO or something like that, and be able to approach it in that way. Giles, do you have anything to add to this? I know that was kind of a word vomit, but.
Not specifically. I just think it's really good to give these sort of real life examples. And, we have these discussions all the time with people. So, every use case is different. There is no one size fits all. What works in one scenario for one group of people is maybe going to work differently in other places. Every industry, every geographical location, every culture is different. So, there are so many different variables here. You have to take that into consideration. And, what works for one person may not work for someone else. And also some people don't feel comfortable having certain approaches. Everyone has their own personality type and their own way of doing things. The more genuine you are, then the more likely you are to get some sort of a positive engagement.
That's a great way to put. Actually, that's a great point. I kind of skipped over, which was before you're even approaching this, your messaging and your approach, which I'm about to talk about in the third example here, is extremely important, right? When you back up for a second, like, it's important to remember what LinkedIn is, right? And LinkedIn, Giles, you said this earlier, it's a social media platform, just like Instagram, just like Facebook, just like Twitter, just like Truth Social, if you will, right? Like all of these, and they all have their different purposes, right? And so if you think about that, like, how would you normally approach something on LinkedIn Instagram or Facebook? How would you normally speak on that type of thing? And what we find out is that it's a little bit different more times than not. It's not quite email etiquette, because it's not really email, right? You're not really emailing these people. You're chatting with them through, by way of what you've used to do. Well, at least us millennials grew up texting, if you will, right? It's kind of like you're texting, and it's a new type of medium that's not email, it's not calling, right? It's a different sort of area. And remembering that LinkedIn is meant for networking. So treat it like that. And so rather than trying to pitch your entire product in the connection message or a follow-up, which no one wants, like, right? No one wants to be sold, but everybody wants to buy to some degree. There's ways you could get to the same conclusion, but being more genuine and conversational. When you make a connection, it's important. So if you think about this, right? When you make a connection with somebody, you send out a connection request and they hit accept. What does that even mean, right? It doesn't mean like, oh, I get to send them this message. Now they're a part of your network that you can lean on later on down in life. Even if it was meant to try and sell them something at one point, you're now connected with this person. And maybe just remember, like, wait, yeah, that's like actually a real person. And like, maybe like if I get let go from my job, this person could, even get me an interview somewhere later on down the road. And so it's important to maybe treat LinkedIn as a more conversational in nature sort of approach, and you will see that your results will get a lot better. People love to help on LinkedIn. And so what I've recognized really early on in my career is if you do approach people in a way that's conversational in nature, you're going to get better results. I use an example of being at a conference. I've said this in a couple of my other webinars, but imagine like everybody here who's been into a conference, right? You rub shoulders with somebody when you're at the line for food, and you have they give you those like waxed apples and like the 8-ounce water and like a sandwich or whatever, and you like rub elbows with them, and then you strike up a conversation. You have one thing in common already. It's that you're both at the conference, right? But then how do you go about that interaction? You probably look at their name tag and you say, oh, hey, what do you do for Salesforce, right? And they'll say, oh, I do this, that, this, whatever. And then what you naturally do is be like, oh, okay, interesting. But naturally in your head, you're sort of understanding where you're going to want to ask and where you want to take this conversation next, right? But you're not saying, hey, my name's Scott, I'm the head of Dux-Soup for this, and this is why you should talk about it, right? No, they'd be like, whoa, hey, I'm going to walk away now, right? You just sort of have a natural conversation. And eventually, if you're taking that correctly, that conversation will be like, so Scott, what do you do? And then you start saying, hey, we should actually chat. What's your LinkedIn? And like, let's see if we can find some time next week. You're doing sort of the same type of approach, or you should be, with Dux-Soup. It can help you scale this out to be able to have more of these conversations and be able to pivot these into getting to what you want, especially if you're able to use a different person's profile, like your CEOs, like a product marketing person, or one other type of an executive. Giles, anything to add there?
No, I don't think so. I think there's so much we could spend time going on to here, but I think we ought to try and move forward with some of the other questions. Otherwise, we will, we want to try and cover as much as we can here today.
Yep. So saturated markets. Moving on to the next one. This one, really briefly, I'll just start to say is like for those who are trying to sell their software to a CMO, or everybody's trying to contact the CEO of a company, right? Definitely remember to be more conversational in nature, and try to be more remember, if you're trying to target a CEO, try to put yourself in the shoes of a CEO or of a CMO or whoever it is that you're targeting, and put yourself in the shoes of that person and try to think why are they don't care about what it is you're trying to sell them at that moment, right? but how can you talk to them to maybe get them to have a conversation about what it is that you're interested in selling them or getting them to take a meeting with you about, right? And so it's important, again, it's why I stress sort of having this conversation. And I promise this will only take 2 minutes here. I just want to quickly show you an example of something I've done where I targeted recruiters who are very much known to be hit up on LinkedIn quite often. And I wanted to target recruiters in a campaign, and this campaign is averaging a 60% acceptance rate and over a 50% response rate as well. And this is an exact campaign here. I call it Recruiter 3. So good on my naming conventions here. But if you could see, for instance, so recruitment is definitely a saturated market. And so what I did here, me being the head of sales, I want them to take a meeting with me where I could talk about Dux-Soup, right? So what I did is, well, I just joined Dux-Soup and I used Sales Navigator to show me who just changed jobs in the last 90 days. So my connection message is, congrats on the new role. I've also taken up the role here at Dux-Soup, trying to get a sense of the use of automation, especially in recruiting, and would love to get your thoughts and connect. This is taking an approach, right? That is where I know that they're on LinkedIn. They're probably utilizing LinkedIn because they're in recruitment. But I'm curious on what their thoughts are on using automation on LinkedIn, which is somewhat of a controversial topic. That's another piece, trying to come in conversational. I know if we start talking about this, I can pivot it to be able to take a meeting. With then my follow-up message being, curious, have you ever tried LinkedIn automation before? Notice how I'm not saying I work for Dux-Soup. It does this, it does that, and does this, and this is what it's all about. Conversation. Hey, out of curiosity, have you ever used LinkedIn automation before? Because I know when they respond, they're either going to say, yes, I have, no, I haven't, or they're not going to respond at all. And I can pivot each one of those from there. And so this is being recorded, so you guys can come back and you guys can see what this campaign is, but this is netting me quite an impressive sort of connection rate with 60% at least. And then I think I have about a 50 or 60% response rate here as well. So that's a little bit on saturated markets and how to approach. Again, it's just being conversational and being able to approach them from a conversational route.
Just very briefly on that, Scott, because I just saw a message come in from Sam. What would the approach be for if you're providing property management services where the client is the accidental or first-time landlord versus the obvious investor? Conversation, make it look genuine. Always make it that way. Don't try and do the hard sell because people immediately put their guard up. Try and make it look like a genuine conversation, a genuine inquiry, asking how maybe how they've come to be in the situation they're in, that kind of thing, showing empathy, and then you're much likely to get a good response rate. So I just wanted to interrupt because I saw the question. No,
that's great. If you have a list of people and you're not sure if they fall into that category or the other category, right? Use that as your way to strike up the conversation with them. Remember, so it's important to, like with Dux-Soup, and especially if you have second and third degree connections, you want to get the acceptance. That's your first goal. Then get them to reply to you, then get them to have a conversation with you, then execute on your call to action, right? And so all of those four should be your sort of scale way of going about this. So I would actually use that question of being like, hey, out of curiosity, do you, like I was looking at your role, do you more, are you relatively new to doing this, or are you like an investment, or what, how do you go about this, right? Try to formulate that into sort of a question to strike it up to then let them tell you, and try to use that as a pivoting sort of dynamic and way to get off. Nice, cool. Moving on to our next slide here, LinkedIn growth and engagement, and just looking at the time, we'll definitely speed it up here. So jumping more into this area, how do you get more connections, responses, and exposure? Well, this one, we may have, there may be some overlapping topics that we just talked about in the previous one, right? But connections and responses and exposure in general, like connections is very quite simple. If we go back to my example of my connection message that I shared, right? I used I use Sales Navigator. Whoa, sorry, I always forget that if I put my thumbs up or something, my camera does that. But I use Sales Navigator and other tools to try and find something that I can use as a rapport sort of building. For example, change jobs in the last 90 days. That's a toggle you can turn on Sales Navigator. Another could be like maybe something more culturally significant, or something that's going on, location based, like South by Southwest, and you're targeting Austin or something like that. Hey, like, are you going to South by Southwest? Something like that. And so I said, congrats on the new role, right? Because they've changed jobs. And then I use something that's similar to myself. Hey, I've also just taken up the reins here at a company. And then I sort of put a little bit of emphasis on what I want to do to connect with them. And I'd be like, I'm curious on your thoughts if you've ever used a LinkedIn automation. Would love to connect and chat more, right? It's coming off very genuine. That's going to help with getting more connections, being genuine and trying again to just strike up conversations. Stop getting in the mindset of like, I'm going to pitch this person and I need to set a meeting with them. Yes, you do. Yes, we want to. Be patient and come in an approach where, because pre-2021, being patient, you could get around that because you could send 100 connections a day. You can't do that really anymore, right, Giles? You need to go, you can send 100 a week, maybe as a standard. You could even push that a little bit further at times, but you need to be a little bit more patient in doing this. So take a little bit more of a, slow approach to having these conversations. For responses,
one thing I'd like to add there, it's actually, as Scott adhered to there, a few years ago, you could send hundreds of connection requests a day, scattergun approach. It didn't really matter. It was a numbers game. The more messages you put out there, the more people you're going to get connected with. Because they put limits in place on the number of connection requests that you can send out, basically you need to do a bit more work up front to narrow down your lists, to refine those search results. The better quality your search results, the fewer connection requests you send out over time, but also the better quality of that list means that you'll get better quality results at the end of the day. So it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy insofar as, you're targeting better, so you get better quality, so there's fewer time wasters, so you actually are much more productive and efficient.
And spending a little bit of time up front with your list and putting yourself in the shoes of the other person. For like with this recruiter campaign I did, right? They've changed jobs, so they've recently landed at a new company, right? So I realized that. What is it like to land at a new company, right? On top of that, they're recruiters, so I know they're going to be on LinkedIn. I'm curious if they knew about LinkedIn automation, right? And so I'm trying to do some intuition or sort of make some assumptions about my list to help make the tone of my messaging more approachable and genuine, right? And then that also comes off with my responses. So how do you get them to reply? Using my framework again, what it said was like, hey, out of curiosity, have you ever tried LinkedIn automation? That I know if they respond with, I know I can pivot that into something. Instead of me saying like, what's the weather in where you're located at? I have to pivot that multiple times to be able to start getting into a conversation about what I want. So what is it that you can say that's conversational in nature and genuine, and be able to reduce the number of back and forth messages needed to be able to execute your overall call to action? For exposure, this is across the board. So one thing I see as a really like across the board, I'm not saying it's wrong, it's not different, but just like remember that LinkedIn, people love LinkedIn because they get to sort of scratch the itch of being a stalker of other people, right? And they get to see your profile photo. They get to see what you're all about. There's links on there that will take them to the company page and take them to their website, your website and whatnot. You don't always necessarily need to include that in messaging, which seems like a little off the wall. I'm not saying not to do it. You can include it in, but at the same time, remember that if somebody is interested in the conversation that they're having with you in general, they're going to view your profile and they're going to want to say like, oh, what is Dux-Soup, right? And they may go ahead and do their own research. It's just normal human curiosity. Think about how you even interact with somebody when you do get interacted on LinkedIn, and how do you go about that approach? And so when it comes to exposure, right, you can definitely include some links, but another area that you want to think about is understand screen real estate. That's another thing I want to say. So when you're posting a link so Dux-Soup supports links, right? When you send a link, remember what the thumbnail is going to do. It's going to block up the whole bottom section of whatever your message is. And so one tip you can do sometimes is maybe like put the link in there and then have like another message go out an hour after that says, hey, like it's about, this, or put the actual context of why you sent the link there, and you could have that be two separate messages potentially. The only reason I do that is because otherwise, yeah, it'll be able to eat up a lot of the screen real estate there. But yeah, do we have another question?
Yeah, we do. This is from Mike. What's the best way to share a PDF in a campaign?
You cannot share attachments currently at this time. However, if you're able to get it into a link format, it will be able to support that. Giles, maybe you can add.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, basically you need to have a URL. It's something that we have been looking at to be able to add attachments. We're not there yet, unfortunately. But yeah, if you put a URL in there, it will render correctly. It renders better actually in regular LinkedIn than Sales Navigator, interestingly. But yeah, it depends upon what platform your target is, of course, using as to where that message comes in. But we could disappear down that rabbit hole if you want, but maybe we should move on.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
Also just sent you I just sent you a link as well to something that we did before Christmas, which might help as well, depending on what it is you want to attach.
Awesome. Moving on here, how can I schedule meetings? Really quickly, I'll just say, I do a webinar on this. I think it's called like 0 to 100 meetings and whatnot. And I talk about how to pivot. Maybe we could throw that link in there in the chat if we can. But in there, what I talk about is how to avoid what I call scheduling hell, which is where somebody says, yes, I'll meet. The natural thing that I think everybody does is like, oh, here's a Calendly, right? But just remember, when you're sending a Calendly, it's kind of impersonable. Like the person has to click on that, then put in their first name and their last name and their email, and then maybe you find the time, right? Otherwise, you could say, hey, are you free at Tuesday at 6? And then you hit like shift enter to like skip a line, or Wednesday at 5 or whatever. Skip all of that, put it out the window. Just say, great, what's your email? I'll coordinate an invite for next week, and let them just give you their email, put something on the calendar for next week, and then come back to them and say, hey, I took the liberty of putting it on the calendar for XYZ day and time. Let me know if that works for you or not. That's my suggestion on how to schedule meetings and keep them engaged in there. Is there a way to see who's active on LinkedIn and respond to messages? So there's a couple of different areas here, especially in Sales Navigator. One of the things I always do whenever I'm building a new search is I target the people who have posted on LinkedIn in the last 30 days, or is it 90 days? I don't know what it is now, this day and age. I do those first, absolutely first, and target those before I target anybody else. And then after I've gone through those, I then start to go through the rest of the list. Giles, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, Sales Navigator filters give you so much better view on things. Yeah, people who are posting, you know, they're active on the platform. It's one of those things though you don't see when people have read your message. It's unfortunately yeah, it's a limited capability there. Yep. But yeah, make use of those filters and see how you do. I think one of the things I just want to very quickly touch on this slide here. I'm just conscious of time as well. Don't just think about, you know, sending connection requests and campaigns, etc., etc. A lot of people use the light touch of just visiting profiles as well. There's so many different ways to use Dux-Soup. You know, update your, you know, we talked about recruitment earlier. Maybe you are recruiting, but you don't want to send out loads of connection requests. So what you could do, and this a use case who's a client who's been using this on and off for the last couple of years, he updates his tagline in LinkedIn to say actively recruiting for blah, 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 blah. And then he gets Dux-Soup to literally visit thousands of profiles a week. And then the people who approach him are the people who are interested. And it becomes a really, really useful way to find people with certain interests. You update your tagline, they see that in the notification. So you think about using Dux-Soup in different ways as well.
Yeah, that's actually a really great point for sure. What is the best approach to connect with my second and third degree connections? I think we've kind of touched on this. This goes with acceptance rate in general and being more genuine and so on and so forth. One last thing to Giles' point though, also how you can use Dux-Soup in different ways, scraping posts. So you can use Dux-Soup to scrape the likes and engagements of a post, and you can pull that data out and you can scrub it and retarget it for different purposes there. That's also a great unknown feature that I don't see many people utilizing when I'm on calls with them. Cool. For the sake of time, let's go to our last slide here. Giles, I think this one's yours.
Yeah, it is. And I'm going to zip through this one. There's some important stuff here, but I'm going to zip through this one, but then I want to try and get through some of these quick fire questions that have been coming in, because I know there's a couple of people there that want to get their questions answered. Is using LinkedIn automation going to put my LinkedIn account at risk? To be honest, it's back to what we said on slide 1. Being a good LinkedIn citizen and respecting the environment is actually much more important, irrespective of whether you're using an automation platform or not. If you're using LinkedIn manually and you're spamming people, you are at risk of, you know, getting some sort of a slap on the wrist from LinkedIn. Now, years ago, you used to be able to send out hundreds of connection requests, and then at some point, you know, you trigger something and they say, yeah, you're using automation, we're gonna ban you. what we see now is actually, this more softly approach from LinkedIn, whereby you trigger a notification if you've sent too many connection requests. If you trigger that too many times, eventually you may get a longer suspension. So the idea is to find a sweet spot of connection requests. And from my experience over the last year, if you've got a Sales Navigator account and a few thousand connections, it's somewhere between 25 and 50 connection requests a day seems to be the sweet spot that works for most people. You can push it higher, but you will trigger warnings. I saw somebody earlier today who was running at 70 and they trigger a warning every 5 days roughly. So if they knock that down to 60, they probably wouldn't trigger the warning. So it's a case of finding the sweet spot that works for your account. Basically, respect the environment, respect the LinkedIn environment, and then you will be fine. And read our recommendations on the various blogs that I think Joe has
Giles, maybe you could touch on increasing the throttle as like a good strategy also, like how to do that, how you can increase it.
Yeah, so I don't know if you could just show the settings there, the throttling settings on me, Scott. So last year I ran a test campaign, and I started my campaign at 25 connection requests a day. So we see there I have my settings set to this. I had actually the profile.
All right. It happened again. I think Giles, we'll give it another second here, but what Giles is referring to here is one of the good ways to go about this in like, how do I, like, can I set it to 50 as soon as I download Dux-Soup? Do not recommend that. What we recommend is it's set to 25 right out of the gate. As soon as you download Dux-Soup, it's at 25 per day, okay? What I recommend doing, and I think Giles is going to say the same thing, is increasing this gradually over the week, over next week and the following week and so on and so forth. One of the ways I like to do this and that I've recommended is run a first campaign of 100 or so and then check it in a week. And if you're averaging, a decent connection rate of, let's call it 20%, so 20 out of 100, 20 people are accepting, right? Then go to 30 next week. And you're still averaging a 20% acceptance rate, great. Now go to 40, or 35, I mean, and then 40 and 50 and so on and so forth, and then get to 50 or so on. In certain cases where maybe you're like, ooh, I have a webinar that's coming up in the next day or two or something like that, and I really need to churn through this, right? Well, it's called a throttle for a reason. So think of like a motorcycle throttle, right? You increase it at times and you let it go at others, right? So what you could do in that case is increase it. And what I've done before is put it to something like 90 for a day. And then the next day, once I've churned through my list, put it to 5, or even like turn Dux-Soup off for a few days, right? And maybe not have a connection request, right? For like about a week or so, just to kind of churn through that. So there are different ways, but on average, Giles is correct. It's sitting in between the 40 to 55 range is what I see average. And I'll be quite frank with you guys. I had mine to 35, and with that, we have so many responses that I need to keep up with that we're actually having our interns start to help out with some of these responses now. So like if you're doing everything correctly, this will be more than enough for you to be able to churn through. Awesome.
Let's go back to the slide.
Yep.
In the interest of time, I think perhaps I should pick up. Maybe we should move on to the next one.
Sure.
Obviously, we've gone through a lot of the questions as we've gone. There's a few that we haven't been able to answer, so for that I apologise. If we can just skip on to the next one, then I can just let everyone know about our next.
Real quick, can you send me I think I'll see the questions, but I'd like to see the questions and then I'd like to respond back to them, at least via LinkedIn or something. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll pick them up afterwards, okay? So our next webinar is on the 14th of May. We've actually had a couple of questions about using email in conjunction with LinkedIn. So this is the perfect session for you. The next webinar is on the 14th of May, when Giles, Scott and myself will be joined by Woodpecker's strategy and growth expert, Damien Liller, as we explore how to use a winning combination of cold email outreach with LinkedIn automation together. So we can be having a look at why a multi-channel approach can work for you, the best practice examples, the do's and don'ts of multi-channel outreach, and how to prospect even using the joint approach. So that's what's coming up. If I very, very quickly pop the link into the chat now, then you can go to that link to book on. Don't forget to give us your reviews. Obviously, it's always useful for ourselves and also for other people who are looking to use Dux-Soup, it's great to have those reviews. So we always reward a nice review with a cap. So that's a little bit of an incentive as well. And just a very, very quick reminder at the very end there that our services, our one-to-one services are available. We have the 15-minute for free, and then we also do booster sessions and technical sessions to help you with the integrations or just general issues that you'd like someone to work through. So Scott and John take most of those calls and walk you through to give you a helping hand. And I think that's pretty much, look at that, we've nailed it now. It's bang on 5 o'clock.
Right on. Well, thank you everybody for joining, and let us know the feedback as well. I'll try to connect with many of you on LinkedIn as well. And yeah, I think we want to do more of these conversations as well into the future. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks guys for joining, and we will see you all in a couple of weeks. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.